Salam, and I stilling. Hello, everybody. My name is Munit Mesfin, and I'm here on this beautiful day next to this gorgeous body of water to read something to you. It is a paper that my father wrote, Professor Mesfin Abebe, Dr. Mesfin, Gash Mesfin, and to a lucky few of us, Abay. And he is someone who has been working on all things natural resource development and environmental protection, was a minister on these two issues once upon a time. He's also a soil scientist, so somebody who truly works on the dust of life and the source of all things life on earth for all of us. And because of his passion around the Nile, he wrote a paper entitled This View of the Nile for Basin-wide Cooperation and Not Conflict. So the paper is a beautiful piece of basically poetry from a scientist about how a win-win solution is possible, a Pan-African solution is possible. We have all of the knowledge, we have indigenous knowledge, we have modern technology and innovation to make it work so that every one of us can be a beneficiary of the great gift that is the White Nile and abay, the Blue Nile, to make the Great Nile. So I hope you enjoy it with the sound of water behind me. Here it is, This View of the Nile for Basin-wide Cooperation and Not Conflict by Professor Mesfin Abebe. Ethiopia is the main source of the Nile that originates from Lake Tana. As a combination of rivers from the northern and western highlands, it flows into the main body as abay, or Blue Nile, and contributes 86% of the total water volume. The other 15% comes from the White Nile. It originates from Lake Victoria, in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, and the mountains of Burundi, Rwanda, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It flows through and feeds the Sud, the vast swamp in southern Sudan. The White Nile and the Blue Nile meet at Khartoum. As a single river, it flows through Egypt, where its annual flow at Aswan is estimated to be some 84 billion cubic meters and ends in the Mediterranean Sea. In such a complex hydrological system, the ecology of the basin ranges from tropical rainforests to mountains, plateaus, and deserts. Therefore, the Nile Basin is iconic because it is the origin of humans and is the center of origin for unparalleled biodiversity of unique flora and fauna. Within such heterogeneous environments, multi-ethnic people have coexisted for millennia. They had the ingenuity to domesticate crops and livestock that are still in use today. The Nile Basin is also iconic because it has nourished and stirred the imagination of people. Testimonies to these are the obelisks in Ethiopia, the pyramids in Sudan, and Egypt. These living examples of monumental feats were accomplished by ancient people. It inspires awe and reverence. It is equally befitting that they are held with veneration as wonders of the world. On the whole, there is so much that the current basin countries can learn from these heritages. Underdevelopment, poverty, and food insecurity are features that describe the current situation in the basin of varied climate, where rainfall either comes ahead of time or too late, or even stops altogether. The Nile Basin is also hit by climate change, which has now become an environmental emergency. Its domino effect has been of cataclysmic dimension. When it rains, it pours. Unharnessed surplus leads to floods. Scant years cause drought. The outcomes of such chronic and acute vulnerabilities have been stark starvation, famine, massive displacement, and death. Again, when salt-rich drainage water from irrigated fields joins the Nile, it increases the salt burden of the river that could eventually lead to total abandonment of farms. A classic example is the poor irrigation water management of the Mesopotamia civilization. Salt accumulated in production fields due to the absence of drainage, and this led to the decline of their civilization. In contrast, the constant Nile flood washed salt and kept the delta in Egypt productive for millennia. Another example is the salt-rich Colorado River that has adversely affected the agriculture of the United States, as affluent has caused devastation in Mexico. The Nile is similarly polluted by salts, agricultural waste, fertilizers, herbicides, and pesticides. Its water quality is further deteriorated by chemicals from domestic and industrial affluent. The millions of hectares that are intensively cultivated under irrigated agriculture in Sudan and Egypt, under poor water management, has led to salinity. While the Aswan High Dam has provided many benefits, it has kept the river from flooding the bank to leach salt. As a result, the delta has been inundated with salt with catastrophic superlatives. But in the past, the Nile flood washed salt and kept the delta in Egypt productive for millennia. Further, the constant pressure on natural resources in general and pristine forest resources in particular has disrupted the ecology of the fragile watershed. This has caused monumental soil erosion. It has led to sedimentation of artificial lakes that are created with high investment. The end result is shortened useful life of dams and jeopardized irrigated agriculture. Their rehabilitation could be very costly or prohibitive and cause the abandon of one's productive fields. Unfortunately, lessons have not been drawn from these classic examples to avert the direct and collateral damages on the Nile. Another concern in the basin is the infestation of the exotic species water hyacinth in Lake Victoria in Uganda and Lake Tana in Ethiopia. That's Imboch. It continues to be a menace despite efforts to control them manually and even with machinery. As a result, the infestation has become more aggressive and invaded adjacent fertile areas. These have significance to the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam and to water reservoirs and agricultural lands in the downstream countries. However, other than declarations of intent in regional and international forums, little concrete action has been taken to address the issue. Equally, despite the writing on the wall, the critical issue has not received the attention it deserves by the basin countries, the stewards of the Nile and its ecology. Its neglect arises out of what is termed as the tragedy of the commons, where everybody's business is nobody's business. As a consequence, the lack of concerted action can put the very existence of Nile at risk. Conversely, the debate continues to rage merely on the quantity of water allocation. The two issues are not mutually exclusive. A parallel focus on the water quality of Nile complements the comparative advantage that each basin country has to ensure the well-being of the Nile. Then there is the urgency to formulate and implement joint policies on water quality for basin-wide with the accommodation of diversity. If we seek, we learn. The need to protect river basins, rehabilitate watersheds, and the abundant water resource of the country is now being realized towards green development. Therefore, Ethiopia has developed and implemented an environmentally friendly and comprehensive water resources management and utilization policy. It is a vital input to combat underdevelopment and fight poverty. It addresses such issues as water quality, flood control, environmental protection. It also has policies on natural resources conservation and environmental protection, including meeting the challenge of water quality deterioration. As a result, it advocates the application of science and technology that is infused with appropriate indigenous knowledge. Further, while Ethiopia stands second in Africa in hydropower potential, the country has hardly utilized this immense resource. This is the phase where over 100 million Ethiopians still rely on forest resources for fuel wood that puts pressure on natural resources. Equally, import of fossil fuel continues to drain the meager foreign exchange of the country. Thus, the policy considers it imperative to develop hydropower to meet the national energy demand of the country as a vital input for quantum leap and sustained kaleidoscope socio-economic growth. Because these conflict with the hegemonic desire of Egypt to control the Nile, it has gained the insidious label of being confrontational. The naked truth is that Ethiopia never contemplated to deny Egypt the use of Nile. Again, at no time did Ethiopia use the river as leverage in its pursuit of multidimensional development, which is decisive to improve the life of people that continue to walk between the raindrops. Adverse climate variability has caused massive displacement, famine, and death. Its continuation means the perpetuation of the dependency syndrome, and the country will continue to beg for food aid with cup in hand. To counter this, Ethiopia has participated in series of consultations and has played front-line role in the realization of various initiatives, including the creation of the Nile Basin Initiative, NBI, about the equitable utilization of Nile to promote sustainable socio-economic development. Against this background, the story told so far has been mutual distrust, hostility, and unbridled hegemonic claim on the Nile. And what is mine, and what is yours is also mine, is the claim of Egypt, and it has now become a source of unremitting, barely camouflaged suspicion and heightened antagonism that has bordered on conflict. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam for the generation of clean hydropower is part of this scheme, and the filling of the dam is used as a delay tactic. It is absurdity since the dam does not reduce the flow of the Nile to Egypt but provides regulated water flow. As a result, it allows year-round irrigation, protects their agriculture and cities against the frequent catastrophic floods that have ravaged them in the past. The evaporation or consumptive use loss from the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam reservoir is a mere fraction of that at Lake Nasser, that has one of the highest evaporation losses of any reservoir in the world, Aswan Dam. It means that it is efficient. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is efficient in conserving water. In addition, by its very position, the dam retains sediment and extends the lifespan of those built in the downstream countries. Again, Ethiopia has to reduce the sediment flow into the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam and other future dams. As a result, billions of tree seedlings are planted annually to protect the Nile and the basin that is the source of its abundant water resource. The sustained campaign for the rehabilitation of natural resources thereby fosters an ecological balance. Obviously, these have relevance for extending the lifespan of dams in Egypt and Sudan. One hopes that similar initiatives would be implemented jointly for win-win benefit. Either way, it does not require a genius with an unusual mind to recognize the windfall benefits that the lower basin states acquire at no cost pro bono. So, were the short-sighted 1929 and 1959 colonial agreements that divided all of the Nile only between Egypt and Sudan with total disregard of the upper basin countries. The treaties were also meant to undercut or forestall the emergence and evolution of basin-wide cooperative agreement. Such treaties have no congruence with the needs and aspirations of other basin countries. The clock has run out on such claims. The 21st century requires a shift from unilateral to multilateral agreements to ensure basin-wide shared development of Nile. This underpins the position of Ethiopia and need not placate Egypt that has no hegemony over the Nile. Equally, it has no reason to seek differential support or benign neglect from Egypt in the development of future multipurpose dams on the Nile in conformity to international laws. Further, there are global examples of collaboration and cooperation on transboundary water. Some examples are the Mekong in Southeast Asia that flowed unhindered even in war times, and the Jordan in the volatile conflict-ridden Middle East. However, Egypt is bent on being a stumble block to the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, even when it realizes the multiple benefits the dam offers. It wants to reinforce its long-held position as sole owner of Nile and protect its future interests on the river. Thus, it intends to pump the Nile from Lake Nasser for the development of irrigated settlement. It also has schemes to open up the Nile outside its boundary, contrary to international law. In addition, it also has projects designed to create facts on the ground out of fear that upper basin countries will limit its use of the Nile. The short-sighted position is premature, where various water management mechanisms exist to increase the flow of the Nile or reduce loss of water to promote efficient use of the available water. Egypt can augment the Nile by developing the vast underground water resource that can last for centuries, if not millennia. It extends up to Libya and supplies much of the multiple water needs of the country. But it may not currently use the aquifer since it backstops if the situation in the basin becomes dire. The desalinization of seawater is another alternative as demonstrated in the Middle East. Egypt, as a member of the Arab League, could collaborate with them to develop such technology. Despite these opportunities, uncharacteristically, the lower basin country, Egypt, threatens the upper basin country, Ethiopia, with water as tool for conflict management on the Nile. It is a reflection of the fact that it does not consider the Nile as a center of mutual interest. It has been the hallmark of the leaders of long before Ethiopia embarked on the construction of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. It is demonstrated by Presidents Nasser, Sadat, and Mubarak, as well as Mr. Boutros Ghali, the Foreign Minister and former Secretary General of the United Nations. All asserted that Egypt would wage war on upstream countries if they took any action that adversely affects Egypt. Then disinformation and misinformation were unleashed out of fear of future multi-purpose development of Ethiopia on the Nile that would diminish its flow to Egypt. Equally, it has harbored and trained dissidents for insurrection in Ethiopia. Worse still, it has instigated and supported armed aggression against Ethiopia. Such effort to destabilize the country is reminiscent of the enemy of my enemy is my friend type of position. In spite of that, Ethiopia all along pursued the diplomatic avenue to negotiate issue of concern to lower basin countries, but not out of fear. By the same token, series of consultations were made with Egypt and Sudan on the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. Again, this was done in the spirit of good neighborliness and to build trust for give and take cooperation. In retrospect, it appears that the overt vision of Ethiopia and the covert mission of Egypt are light years apart. For instance, what is now witnessed goes beyond public relations stunt. Egypt has unleashed a double-faced provocation related with the semantics hiccup as a pretext. Hence, it attempted to rally support and made the Nile a subject of international controversy and instrument of politics. It is also baffling that Egypt bypassed the African Union, to which it is a member, and brought this case to the Security Council of the United Nations. It also continues to lobby the Arab League with the claim that Ethiopia has become a threat to its survival. In essence, this is interference in the internal affairs of a country. There are also signs of various overt and covert activities to create polarization, conflict, and chaos on ethnic, political, and religious lines. Such arm-twisting tactic is oblivious of the win-win opportunity that cooperation on the Nile offers. Then the cliché that when two elephants fight, it is the grass that gets hurt would be true if both governments do not strive to meet their needs through joint exploration of the Nile. As a consequence, the invocation of war to coerce concession from Ethiopia is an absurdity. War is not a preferred option, but if push comes to shove, Ethiopia will take all necessary measures to defend its sovereign right on the Nile. It is equally possible that the rest of the upper basin countries will respond accordingly. Then, true to those who live in a glass house should not afford and cannot afford to throw stone, that cliché becomes true. One does not have to think outside the box to recognize that Egypt would be the ultimate loser against their united might. It might also be recalled that over 120 years ago, the peasant forces at the Battle of Adwa performed heroic deeds. Irrespective of their origin, faith, and ethnic background, this army that had little modern armament scored a resounding victory over the Italian army that was armed to its teeth. Through their huge sacrifice, the sovereignty of the country was asserted. The world-acclaimed feat that was accomplished by a multi-ethnic force a century ago is celebrated every year with a grand salute. On the occasion, the present generation vows to reject any foreign interference. Equally, the people have reaped monumental benefit from the positive wind of change that accommodates diversity. Thus, their governing value is to repel any direct and or indirect interference on Ethiopia. This resolve is vividly demonstrated by the successful first phase filling of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam that solidified their resolve to stand together for the completion of the symbol of their unity. With such public support, the democratic government has the political, diplomatic, and military options to combat any threat-laced direct and or indirect interference on Ethiopia. Yet Egypt might think that this acrobatics justifies the end. But the end will not justify the means. The outcome will not be cooperation, but the entrenchment of respective existing positions. The precedents can harden self-interest that could encourage the upper basin countries to take equally separate measures. Should they harness as much of the Nile within their border, there could be substantial decrease in the volume of water flow. Then the lower basin countries would cut the ground from under their feet. Then the lose-lose situation can precipitate conflict in such a geopolitical hotspot region. Its outcome is havoc, where brutal force leads to bloodbath, natural resources destruction, and socio-economic disaster. To avert such scorched earth situation, the basin countries, as a family of nations, must establish some safeguards. It is with this conviction that Ethiopia has welcomed the African Union, which has the reputation of solving African problems by Africans. It should be vanguard in the realization of the legal framework that governs the shared water resource of the Nile. It is not a choice but a necessity to resolve the real or imagined differences with the accommodation of all basin countries. It promotes the unity and diversity in the basin where people are interconnected in more ways than one. To that end, it should play a frontline role in the establishment of the Nile Basin Commission. It is critical to address the myriad substantial basin-wide differentiated needs to promote a mutually beneficial snowballing virtuous circle of prosperity. It advances without ambiguity the larger picture of green development for improved quality of life. Then, the Nile and the African Union as a prototype worthy of emulation would increase in grandeur and magnitude. Otherwise, too much would be lost for too little. This is as much a tenet of faith as any belief. That is the end of the paper by Professor Mesfin Abebe. This view of the Nile for basin-wide cooperation and not conflict. It's 100% clear that we have the knowledge, we have the people, we have the technology to make this an absolutely win-win situation. There is no reason why the peoples cannot cooperate, the governments cannot cooperate, and we cannot all be beneficiaries of this tremendous gift The Nile is a gift. Abay is a gift. The White Nile is a gift. And this gift is something that we cannot claim, but we can utilize for the betterment of ourselves and our peoples, and nobody has to suffer for it. So I hope that you've enjoyed this paper. I am a very proud daughter, and I'm so glad to have had this opportunity to read it. I'm grateful for my father for his work throughout his life in environmental protection, natural resource development, soil protection, everything that he has done to advocate for sustainable development for Ethiopia and the African continent. We are all grateful for him and so proud of him and want to thank him for his efforts in his lifetime. And so may you live long, and may you keep on writing and sharing your wisdom with us, and may we hear you. May we have the heart and wisdom to hear the advice of those that have important information to share on how we can be cooperative and win and collaborate and thrive. Thank you so much for your listening to me, and I hope you've enjoyed the beautiful soundtrack of water and wind and the sunlight slowly rising and browning my face. Thank you so much.